The village, let me get my microphone back here. This is the Village of Ballston Spa Historical Preservation Commission. This is only a work session tonight. There will not be any actions on any COAs tonight. So what we are going to, the big picture, and I'll go through the agenda here shortly, but the big picture is we're going to look at a bunch of stuff that we've already looked at once and we need to look at again and then vote on, and then we're going to look at some new stuff that we'll go through and hopefully pick up some of the stuff that we've previously talked about, plus some new stuff that Alex has to talk about, and he'll explain what that is when we get to it. With everybody's permission, I want to, if you pull out the agenda, item 5, I would propose that we put in front of item 4. So the order would be 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, and 8. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay. Next thing I want to do is make sure we have on the record, and for people who are here, who everybody is for the video in particular, and I'm going to start with my left and ask everybody, including staff, all the way to my left, to please state your name for the record.
Alexandria Rye.
John Taylor.
Richard Vincent.
Thomas Schroeder.
Ann Lucy.
David Herring.
Alex Cameron.
Okay. So we called the meeting to order. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the previous meeting's minutes, the August 26, 2021 minutes? Not hearing anybody there. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, the motion's carried. Okay, has everybody been able to review the normal maintenance and minor work items between August 20th and September 16th?
I actually was not. Alex, do you have a slide you can put up of that? I got back at midnight last night and didn't get to it today.
And this is for just the review of staff approved
Yes.
items.
Yes.
Minor COAs and so forth.
Minor COAs issued.
I'm not seeing that populated in the online agenda. We did take care of that. We had some issues with our automated agenda late last week. So let me see. Yeah, I just pulled it up on our drive here. There were 3 COAs approved by staff. One was some restriping and paving at the Resort Carolina Hotel campus, which is, of course, addresses 80 Carolina Vista Drive. Some of you may be aware that this is associated with the approved rezoning, one of the conditions for the Resort Lodge that was approved by Village Council. There it is. That's the first one. The second one is some replacing of some fencing that is at the back of the Carolina Hotel campus, where the service area is and the staff area is. It's really, the main change for that was a non-functional automatic gated fence to one that actually functions, and it just located it actually more away from the outer property line in. The other one was basically a driveway change, a material change.
Thank you.
A little more work than the last 2 months on a staff perspective, but not much.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments on that? Okay, we mark the record that it's been reviewed then, please. The next thing is other business. Discuss and consider recommending changes to the historic district guidelines. This, in a macro point of view, is where we've changed the words guidelines to standards and some other basically administrative narrative corrections to do it. What I want to do with that is we'll call that up and we'll go down through it rather quickly. They'll pull up a screen, take a quick look at it. If you have anything you want to talk about on that screen, sing out so that we know to stop. If not, I'm going to say next, and we'll pull up the next screen and go through it. That way we've ensured that we've gone through all of the things that are on there. Most of it is stuff, I think all of it is stuff that we've seen before and we've discussed, so I don't expect a lot of discussion on it, but if you see something you don't like or got a question about, please.
It's not a matter of discussion. At the meeting of the village council, I think we had a couple of pages that contained both what I would call perfunctory wording changes that I think we would all be in agreement with, and some that were more substantive that we have not really talked about. Has that been separated out?
Well, we'll find out when we go through it. If you see that, then you see one of the places where you think it stops, please do.
And the only reason I mentioned it is I think council was amenable to approving things that were of a perfunctory nature, like guidelines, things that were, even if, well, if we vote on it, I guess it'd be okay.
Right. So so we can either vote on it or we can have staff remove it from this particular document so we can discuss it further depending on
Exactly.
how it goes through. Does that make sense to everybody?
And some of those changes were those that are listed under minor work and then some language under some of the major work items. The only other one that, that may fall under is references to the, whatever applicable project would be in meeting the color palette. The current language says should be in the Village of Pinehurst color palette. This red line document changes every one of those shoulds to a must. So those, I think, John, would be the only two items I could think of. But if the commission, in reviewing these, page by page in a way, were agreeable to it, I think the council can certainly consider that. But yes, largely it's editorial changes, as we've talked about.
My sense of the council is they are willing to approve the perfunctory things. They'd like to know about the things that are not perfunctory and may or may not choose to discuss those.
Right. No, that's clearly their option to do that. We pass what we think is the correct stuff and then they get to do what they get to do with it. So
But you mean on the 28th? As soon as
I don't know when the
28th?
next, I don't know when
Thought
the
I
next
saw
time it'll come
something
up.
about-
Yes, so based on the direction from council at the meeting last week, which, John, thank you and Eric for representing HPC with that, is that, hey, let's not wait. If you guys formally, act on what we're getting ready to do, then bring it to them at their meeting on Tuesday, and they can go ahead and adopt those changes.
But then our work does not stop, right?
No, we got
Okay.
plenty to do
Our
after.
work never stops.
And just, I will not be able to go the 28th, so if there's need for moral support, it's not going to be me.
I'll go. Yeah, that's fine. One other thing I want to do before we actually start in this edition, and I apologize for not having done this first. I know everybody, we agreed to do this tonight. I want to agree ahead of time as to when we have to end this meeting so that we know, and somebody isn't sitting here, I got to be out of here, I got to be out of here. I've already asked Alex, and his answer to me, and I think it was very clear, was 8 o'clock tonight. He's walking out that door if we're still here.
So early?
Yeah. So I
won't be here to watch you.
Okay, when do you need to be out?
There's no specific time. I would think 6 or 6:30 should be sufficient. I would
right,
hope we
let's-
could be sooner.
Let's say 6:30, if we have to get to that point. 6:30, I'll do 6:30, Ann,
Sure.
okay?
I don't know why we can't finish
I
by
haven't heard a
6.
single word about dinner.
Well,
That is dinner.
you're welcome to get up and get it at any time.
So is that after we finish?
Now, after, during,
Maybe not.
You want to make a motion to eat a cookie?
6:30, can you do that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Alex, you're good. Okay, so we will, right now, continue on until 6:30 unless we decide to change it at some point for some reason. So I just wanted to put it into this thing so it wasn't like midnight or something. Not that I was going to be here at midnight either. Okay, let's start with this. And again, this is, I think, is everybody familiar with the redlining process? Okay,
Yes.
good. So I'm just going to go take a look at it. Every time I say next, she's going to change the page or bring up the next part of the page, whichever it is, and we'll go from there. So I'm just going to keep going with a slight pause unless somebody says stop. Okay, next. Next. Next.
Stop for 1 minute.
Okay.
There was sensitivity on the part of the council to the word particular in the very first line
Of,
of the last paragraph on page 3. I don't know that it adds anything. I would be fine with leaving it out, but
at times determine that a particular proposed change or design which does not meet the standards, in fact, is more congruous than the other. That a proposed change, I'm not sure, yeah, it's almost redundant.
No.
We can-
Simpler is better in my mind.
I absolutely agree. Anybody disagree? Strike the word particular? Okay. Thank you, John. Next, page 4, that's standards. Yes. Hold on. Okay, next. Next. Next.
Alex, I assume that clarification, rather than North Carolina to Moore County, that's a clarification of fact.
It's exactly, it's the way it's addressed, it says the county Supreme Court in the actual statute. So-
Correct.
And seeing where Moore County, although that's Superior Court is more than just Moore County, but
But it's within 30 days actually of the effective date, just to be specific, for what it's worth.
yes, the effect, the date 10 days after it's mailed, effectively. So that's, in fact, and we'll get into this more, but it is 30 days for Superior Court, and we're going to have to talk about this some more too, but, and it's also 30 days for the Board of Appeals. And there's some things in there.
Effective
we're not
date of
gonna-
a final or.
Effective date of the
From when the decision is filed with the clerk of the board's office, which is typically when Eric comes in and signs the findings document.
And then it goes in the mail or email.
But since these
and-
are FAQs, maybe just put generally within 30 days, or, I don't know.
Within 30 days. and
Those
they're
two
gonna-
30-day periods run contemporaneously. So I don't get
They
to go.
may run contemporaneously or they may not.
I don't know, yeah.
And when we get to that point of discussing that issue, but this is for Q&A, this is good information,
Correct.
Okay.
significant information for here. We can get into it when we actually talk about it more. Next.
Wait, Tom, what do you mean by when we actually talk about it? I thought if we raise no objections here, this is quasi-approved.
This is, I mean, but there will be a point when I plan on raising an issue about this whole appeals thing that is not involved in this document at all.
Okay,
This is sufficient for a Q&A, is what my point is. For an attorney, it's probably not.
Which then in that case, the statute will rule.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. It's not in this document, though, so we don't have to worry about it in approval of this one.
All right, we need Q11 was the one that Eric wanted to raise based on the
Okay.
discussion with council there. So,
All right, and can you bring that one up, please? Not Q8, Q11.
She's going down right there.
Yep,
It's that
right
red underline there at the end of Q11.
This was the one that Eric proposed making the changes to, our chairman. And those changes he's proposed are here.
without specifically precluding edits to the language. This was what I raised some meetings ago, that because you can find one or two examples, in my mind, that does not make it congruous. Knowing that there are many buildings that have had things done to them prior to the effective date of any guidelines that won't be repealed.
And that was raised during the June 17th work session. Again, you guys probably remember that Eric, John, and Ann both provided a great level of, or the bulk of these changes that we raised. My recommendation was to maybe look at the language of may not be, just because there could potentially be some sort of instance out there in which someone could make a case, and provided some thoughtful language, and that's some language that I would support. So
And
we just worked something out.
does this include your thoughts or not?
No, well,
Okay, then what would your thoughts be?
the fact, I'm going to read what I threw out there. The fact that any particular feature or set of features contained in an application being reviewed by the HPC exist on one or more other properties in the historic district does not necessarily meet the applicant's burden of demonstrating that the application, if approved, would be congruous.
Vote for Ann's.
That last part again?
Did you read that?
It does not demonstrate that it's congruous, right?
Does not.
Oh,
Go ahead and read it again one more time.
The fact that any particular feature or set of features contained in an application being reviewed by the HPC exists on one or more other properties in the historic district does not necessarily meet the applicant's burden of demonstrating that the application, if approved, would be congruous.
I like it. I think it's a little more precise. I like it.
And remember, this is just a Q&A thing. It's not a issue other than just guidance and along the way. So I would agree with Ann.
I think it's good language.
Very good language, yes.
And it almost comes up every single
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Because, you know.
Somebody said, well, I saw,
Well, it's, I mean, not to isolate Mark Parson, but he, coming from the history of this, he makes good points, which is, if you were on Medlin, there's 6 or 7 houses there with vinyl siding, right? And a certain look, and on that road, you can make that, the point that the 6 adjacent houses may have vinyl siding, I'm congruous, and it always puts you in a tough spot, and because you're always like, it just doesn't, you know, so not enough can be said about that, because that's going to keep defeating what the intent of what we try and do here is.
I mean, each case, in a sense, is taken on its own merits, not on pointing to one thing over here and say, well, I know a house over 3 streets over that's got vinyl shingles on it. Well, it may have vinyl shingles on it because it had that one before the HPC even existed. And if they go to change it, they also would have to change it as well, or likely, they're not in front of us, but yeah, so I think.
In this,
Did you get that?
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
And I'm sorry, I had 2 other points with regard to this one one of them only came to me literally sitting here.
Okay.
One, I don't think we need to define incongruous.
I would recommend we do that for the following reasons, is the fact that the statute actually uses that term in making decisions for COAs. I mean, I can pull it up if you want to look at it, but it actually does use that term.
But do we
incongruous.
use it anywhere else in our guidelines? And if we deny something, by definition, we have said that it is not congruous
Right.
or incongruous.
Yeah, I agree with John, but I would move in keeping with the character of the property of the Pioneers Historic District up to congruous, and then you've got, right?
Well, the second point, I actually looked up what the definition of congruous was.
Right.
And according to Merriam-Webster, there are actually 2 definitions. The first one is more relevant. It says being in agreement, harmony, or correspondence. And if we then added with the character of the property of the Pioneers Historic District.
Fine by me.
Now, I don't care, this is not tremendously different, but I don't know who came up with these words as being the definition, if you will.
I know who came up with them, but it's not irrelevant.
I vote for
issue.
John's. I also vote to take out incongruous is by definition not congruous.
Take out the whole, and if I understand it, then what people are saying is take out that whole line that starts it with incongruous.
And if it's in
And-
statute and someone
And
wants to
moving
appeal it.
up the character of the property or the Pinehurst Historic District. Is that
I
correct?
think it's supposed to be property, no, or is right, I beg your pardon.
Why don't you just match it with what's above? So if you've got congruous, it says means appropriate, and then incongruous means inappropriate. Congruous means harmonious, so you say incongruous means not harmonious. Compatible means not compatible, and then consistent is not
That's
consistent
kind
with
of
the character.
redundant if you just take it out of there then.
I know, but I mean, I like the idea of having a definition there for people who review this prior to an application to.
But I think
to-
what we usually say is congruous or not congruous, don't we? So,
If our motion to deny does not say it's incongruous,
I
I don't
agree.
believe.
I mean, the only reason I raised the issue is because the statute 160D does use that term, and
And if someone appeals it to the Moore County, then they can go by the statute. I don't want to say we don't have to, but I don't think we have to be that specific.
again, it's a Q&A. It's not regulatory by nature. It's just examples that people can go by to do that. And I'll be honest with you, I could go either way. So if everybody else thinks, Alex, you got an input?
Yeah, I totally agree too, that we do need to remember that this is just a section of the document that's meant for guidance. Typically, as you saw in my correspondence this morning, this is stuff that's in a separate document altogether typically, as an aid.
Handout, yeah, or something.
So I don't, having both of them appearing to be like a definition in the section that's not the glossary probably isn't appropriate. I don't think either one of them have a place right here. Also, just to confirm that the statutes do not mention congruous. It is just specifically incongruous. So I don't think we need to define either. I think that takes any
Yeah, incongruous should
interpretation or
go away.
anything
Leave the
else.
rest of it, put the tail of the bottom, incongruous up on the top, and go with that.
And if it makes, if there's a level of comfort, if we don't define anything in our regulatory documents specifically, then the default is Merriam-Webster's definition.
And if needed, we could always put incongruous in the glossary, because it's not in there right now.
That might be a much more appropriate place for it, would be in the glossary.
What's
So take it
Merriam-Webster again? What are the,
Being in agreement, comma, harmony, or correspondence with the character
oh,
of.
we emphasize compatible right below too, that's kind of interesting.
They use.
If you go to a different dictionary, you'll get a slightly different definition to it, too. So, I mean,
Didn't look in OED right, we could,
yeah, so I mean, you can, 3 dictionaries, you're going to have at least 2 different definitions of that word, or different examples, because it's really what
and
you're.
the reality, which I tried to point out to council, is the word itself is a little gray. It's not a black and white word.
And that's why we're
Which is good.
quasi-judicial, is because we get to interpret those things.
It's a quasi-precise terms.
Yeah, there you go. If that's the way you want to look at it, that works for me. So we're going to take that out, and have you got that out? Okay. Anything else on that page? Next.
Go back to the other document.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Go to the next page. Okay, it's thinking. Oop.
Off to the races.
That was the page we were
12.
on.
All right, so now we're headed to 13.
Now we're headed for the
Oh,
next.
section 2, here we go.
Next.
But here's one of these, maybe that was one of those items that John maybe got the feeling that council wasn't really ready to discuss as a change to basic work and routine.
I think it was less this one. This, first of all, I think it's pretty clear and pretty specific. And secondly, I think we might decide that we are all in agreement with that, and then it would become a recommendation to the council, and they can change it if they want to.
It's theirs to do what they do with, once we approve it and send it up, and then
I
we
think
can
for
always
us,
send back comments.
I think for us, it's a good clarification, and I would hope that it would survive.
Okay, next.
Here's where we got into where the council, I think, was a little, whoa, wait a minute, you're actually making some pretty significant changes, or proposing some pretty significant changes here.
Well, the first bit here was just this was Eric's suggestion to relocate that paragraph above.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, that's right.
So this one really isn't that much of a change other than location then.
I have a question about the last sentence.
The last sentence of that first paragraph that's read,
Minor work projects must meet all applicable requirements.
Standards, maybe we should put standards instead of
Standards,
requirements
period.
there.
What's to be approved by staff? I mean, it's either meets them or it doesn't.
Correct. I mean, we could shorten that sentence.
the concept there is the only thing that staff can do is approve. If it needs to be disapproved, it has to come back to us.
It's as if, to me, being probably the only guy here who's not a lawyer, that the staff has to approve the requirements is kind of.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Projects should meet all applicable standards
That's the change I've,
to be approved by staff.
Period.
Period.
minor work projects must meet all applicable standards.
Yes.
For minor work, they have to, or otherwise you can't approve them.
Or they become major work because they're elevated to the commission for their consideration.
Right. Well, no, they actually remain minor work, but are then I think
but if they
technically
didn't,
appealed. Yeah, that has to come back to us then at that point, either way, whether you want to relabel them or not. So that's, anything else on that page? Next.
Other than at some point, we're going to look at each one of these, whether or not they fit the buckets, right? Okay.
Goal is, once we're doing this, done with this review, we're going to either pass this or not pass it.
Curious, why the change from 120 to 144?
why the 120 to begin with is beyond me.
Yeah.
144 seems to be somewhat arbitrary, other than to be in line with a dimension that is 12 feet, but, you know, I think we're going to talk about that a little bit.
120 was totally arbitrary, too.
I know. So I think with the next agenda item, we can keep this the same for now, because the next agenda item, when we're talking about the staff proposed changes, we can revisit that number. That is something that,
I think it was
Peter
just a matter
recommended.
of, instead of 12 by 10, this is a 12 by 12
so for now, just leave it alone.
or 144, I would say, unless somebody disagrees.
I think we ought to leave it in there so that the commissioners will have something to argue about.
Hey, there you go. Sounds good to me.
I'm neither the architect nor the lawyer on the committee, but if a building were 11 by 11, it'd be 121 square feet, and it wouldn't exceed 12.
There you go. That's an
That are no more than,
Yeah, that,
maybe.
the numbers, the best anybody can figure was arbitrary to start out with, and 144 is 12 by 12.
Special measuring tape.
Same change. Next.
On technology. There we go.
Could I talk a bit about the one, two,
The bottom one?
the fourth paragraph?
Right.
I would like, if it's acceptable to you guys, to have a shot at that last paragraph about what would constitute a reasonable submission when it comes to drawings and documents and dimensions and specs and so forth. Can we set that one aside till the next go-round?
We can, that's an option, or we can put it through this way and then go ahead and change it at another time when we want to, we've got more time to talk on it. Is this incorrect?
It depends on whether you're a lawyer or a non-lawyer or an architect or a non-architect.
This is one, I mean, I do have
It needs
experience
some
in law, but this is more of a practical issue to me, because
Well, just as an example of the things that are difficult for me, it says sufficient enough, or specifications such as building height and setback distances, neither of which are specifications, for example. Those would be dimensions.
and sufficient enough is kind of
And
goofy
then-
wording anyway.
Just sufficient.
Then it goes on
Sufficient.
to name specific types of drawings. For example, it says elevations, but
Okay,
nowhere does it say
let's
floor
pull
plan.
that one and then go back and revisit it another day.
That would be helpful to me, and I promise, but before we meet again, I'll do
Because it doesn't, the big thing we've got to get through is the standards issue right here. So this is one we can do. So can we take that, Alex, back to the,
Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah, my only caution, and I'm sure it'll be fine, but my only caution against this would be not to make this too much of a burden.
Right.
Too
Absolutely.
rigid.
Having gone through this process myself, there's a lot of people that spend, this is a cart before the horse kind of process, where people don't want to spend and go too far down the road with too much money before knowing. So, I mean, I think what we're saying is, whatever you determine information you need to give this committee to make the right decision.
let's pull this one so we can then have further discussion about it, because I think it warrants further discussion.
I hear you.
As David said, and as,
There's a blend there, I think, take a good stab at it.
I'm happy with that. I would also be happy to just end at where applicable. Because if we don't have enough to make a decision, we're not going to make a decision, no matter how many individual characteristics you list.
right,
You know, it's 78 characteristics, but if we don't think it's enough, we're not making a decision.
that's right. And that's what we're designed to do.
And
So
by the
let's-
way, I think the inclusion of elevations, whether we do it later.
That's why I don't want to spend any more time on it tonight. Let's just pull it, and everybody's got some more work that we think we have more work to do with this thing. So let's put it back to what it was, not make it part of this change package. When we get, then we'll turn around, and Alex, if you could add that to your list of things that we need to talk in the future, then we can go back and hammer it out the way we want and go do it.
Think about, this is a submission just for an application, so
Yeah.
it's really got to be sufficient for staff to even get passed.
Yeah.
They'll need some guidance.
Yeah,
though,
I don't want to get tied up in this thing. That's why I'm saying let's table this issue and.
I'd like to ask about the 4 weeks. Is 4 weeks, you guys are the ones who wanted that, right, Alex, I think?
Yeah, Peter pushed hard for it, and I understand why. You know, more time isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I'd be more
There's a
than
bunch of things
happy.
that people want to talk about, and I don't want to get into one of these right now.
Can I draft something up for you guys and bring it
Yeah,
next to the next
please.
meeting?
Absolutely.
Got it.
So for now, we're going to leave this.
Yes,
Yes.
leave
With
the
the-
wording
whole thing?
unchanged. Take those changes out of that. when
I'm
we
going
send this
to,
one in.
except for the capitalized.
Yeah, you can leave the capital thing in there.
Is it okay for me to distribute by email to us
Yeah, just work with
a
Alexandra.
draft?
You'll two come up with something, then we can look at it.
Yeah,
Okay.
We took it out for right now.
yeah.
Took it out.
Just the M and the W are the two that'll remain on that one then. And then we'll go back and work it on. I don't want to get bogged down in one thing or we'll never get through this tonight. Anything there? Next.
Fine.
Next.
It's going. I know. It's slowly just, I know. This is when I need to be able to touch it.
Next.
Can I also propose to bring a change to this for you all? Can I revamp this and update it and,
Flow chart?
uh-huh.
What you're saying is there's more changes that you feel need to, that you
Like-
would recommend to be in
Just to
there?
simplify it. Just,
Like a brand new one that looks a lot better.
Yeah. Then let's return this one to normal then, and if you would bring us an update of your recommendations, that would be great. That is a little hard to follow, but
Things can be beautified.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll spend some time.
I was going to say, it seems to, the purpose of the changes proposed here seems to be clarifying where you submit the application.
Yes, and that's really
If
just.
that's not germane, then I would wait for it to come back.
Yeah, I think it would be worth waiting to, so just, Alex, if you were to remove that from
We
the,
need a flow chart?
it's handy to have,
Yeah.
yes, for contractors and stuff to look through it.
I would
Well,
ask Alexandra, as you
fine.
do this, I don't even know the answer to this.
Well, how about just real quick, Tom, not to spend much time on it, we'll show you what Alexandria's done
Already
already.
come up with.
Oh, have you
Should've
already
led
got
with
one?
that.
Okay. Well,
Just
we'll
really
take it.
quick.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as we keep moving, otherwise we're going to be here at
Be
midnight.
an extra fee if you go from,
Yeah.
In my working career, I found some people find flowcharts very helpful and others get confused by them, and I never know who is which, so.
And honestly, I don't know how many folks have really found this or found it even more than that to be helpful. But it was, the committee at the time
As a
was very
recovering,
large, and we needed a lot of tasks to give certain people.
as a recovering computer programmer, I find them helpful, but not everybody does.
Myself
Me
included.
too. I find it if I can understand that, then I probably, and that matches what really is going on, then that really does help.
Did you have it on that drive or your personal drive? If you go under, okay, the official local historic district standards and guidelines, that is where I had been working in this, the 2021 update. Yeah. Flow chart, there he is.
Well, that's,
Ooh, it's pretty. It's got
yeah,
color.
it's even in color, ooh.
of what, utilizing the other information, pulling it in here for easy coordination to allow you to see the process under each category. So what this would allow is just basic information at the top, and then you would find your category of which your project will fall in based on a prior section and go from there. And it's just taking all the other information from the matrix, throwing it in here, or from the flow chart, and throwing it in here. But I can bring you something like this in that document. You all can decide at a later date, but this is,
Yeah, I think I think this is a good idea, because this is an easier flow chart to understand than the previous one. But, yeah, so let's return that to what it was and take that portion of the change out. Okay, next. Two shoulds to must.
Were these just tidying up the remaining shoulds that didn't get caught at some other point? So I thought we tried to eliminate should.
Well,
What page is this? Can you
This
scroll down
is
just a little
page-
bit?
little bit
more?
down,
yeah.
There are a lot of shoulds. right?
25.
A whole lot of shoulds, right?
Yeah, there are.
There are a lot of
These were
shoulds.
chosen for some reason.
Yeah, let me see, I've got the document that was created
Okay.
many months, not a year or so ago. Let me see if I can just see. It's not showing me who made that comment.
I believe I actually made that comment, because I went through and changed a lot of the shoulds
From
to
September,
must.
believe it or not, September 17th of 2020.
I did not make that comment.
Or did I?
Anyway,
Okay, so we can,
read through them. The bottom
But
one,
must be in the
Must be
color
in the
palette.
color palette.
that's your color palette one that Alex talked about. The one above it,
That is-
shutters and arched windows.
so every mention in this document to being in the color palette was changed to a must.
Now, that's what the
In
bottom
this
one is.
document you're seeing.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
The arched and equal height of the window opening was based, Peter made those changes last year based on a lot of the feedback I think he was gaining from the commission and what was coming up at the hearings.
Couldn't possibly have been me.
Not on the shutters.
You're the one that brings up shutters and stuff. What's your 2 cents on those top two?
I'll vote for it.
Okay, and I have no issue with it then. Anybody else on that one before I go next?
I hate to do this, but this is why we're doing this.
Okay, that's fine.
Let us suppose, and I don't want to show college colors here, but let us suppose hypothetically that both the Clemson purple and the Clemson orange were in the approved palette.
Right.
I personally don't think that they are compatible with one another. And that's not just because my son went to Wake Forest.
Right.
But using a standard of should be compatible seems to leave, I like the must be in the color palette, but after that, who are we to determine that these two colors are incompatible?
Well, we had some discussion about that too, and go back a little bit of history to clarify some of this. There were 2 sections of the palette, and Alex, correct me, there was a section that was labeled like trim and a section that was labeled main color. At some point, it got brought up, and I don't know if it actually got put into here, but people said, well, I want to take the trim color and make that the basic, and a basic color and make it the trim. The option they chose really wasn't that bad. But, so it become, and I'm not so sure that somebody didn't cite a case to the effect of that. But anyway, I won't bring that into this deal. So that's, again, if you make it a must and we don't do it, then we got to say, hey, this is one we're intentionally not following the guidelines for.
And why?
And why it's more congruous if what they proposed goes through versus it's not in the palette. Well, the reality of it is that palette is, what is it, that thick? It's like 3 or 4 inches thick, and if you can't find a color in there that's the right color for what you want, it pretty well doesn't exist. So it has to be in there, and it has to be one of those, and that's all that statement says, is it must be one of those, and all you're, from I see, you're just basically saying, okay, now it's a must, and if we don't, I don't think we're ever going to find ourselves in a position where you can't find one that isn't in there because it's made by, I think, Benjamin Moore or somebody, whoever designed it, so the color names don't match exactly a color palette and another one anyway. You got to hold them side by side and see if they're the same thing.
We could just make a, the commission can just make a decision right now on all of these. If you want to keep it as should now and table it till later, or move it to a must, I mean,
The only thing I see making the bottom one a must, that whole thing into a must is that,
I would suggest that it should read shutter color.
Awning.
awning,
Sorry, awning, where, I gotta find out where I am again.
The
very
last
bottom
one's
line.
C.
Oh, yeah, awning colors must be in the Village of Pinehurst color palette, period.
I would be fine with that because it takes us out of the business of a standard that is not congruous, yet is very wishy-washy.
So say that again?
Awning colors must be in the Village of Pinehurst color palette, period.
That's simpler and cleaner, if you ask me.
done.
Okay? Anybody disagree with that? Sounds good. Okay, how about the two up front, B and C? And I'm not clear where we're standing with those. You want to leave those at must?
Yep.
Okay. Next. Let's not beat a horse. Only one on that. It's the bottom down there. Same story.
Ditto.
Same wording, Alex, on that one?
Get rid of, okay, new porches must be in the Village of Pinehurst color palette?
Painted.
That's it.
Must be painted, yeah. Well, I guess they.
Should be painted, stained by color in the
Wanna
Village
leave
of
that
Pinehurst
should?
color palette.
You know,
Using a
painted-
color and-
Painted and stained is only a multitude of
Applications.
ways to make things a color. We don't care how they make it that color, provided it's a color.
Yeah, like say
But it has to be in the palette.
Trex type material or something is.
Yeah.
So new porches must be in the Village of Pinehurst color palette. That would be the new reading.
Well-
Is that right?
You had a paint or stained, I think, in there.
That doesn't have to be painted.
No, you
It
could
could
rub
be
it on the outside.
advertised, it could be.
The color of new porches must be in the color palette.
Yeah, David's got the language there, same as before.
Okay.
As Alex made a good point, you can buy a
Yeah,
material
great,
that's pre-
pretty. As long as it's in the color palette, I don't care how it got there, really. Okay. Next page.
That's what, that was my.
All right, hold on, wooden. Same thing. Yep.
Well, it is, that does strictly call out wooden. I think, that's not a synthetic wood.
Well, suppose it's a natural color that is neither painted nor stained.
I'll bet you can find that color in that palette.
Exactly, so how do we care, I don't see how we care how it's made a color.
I agree with you on that. If it comes pre-painted, then as long as it ends up that color that's in the palette, do I care how it got there, really? Or not, I hate to be callous to the story, but if it comes pre-painted, then
Particularly not when 150 of those colors are some version of white, which from the street cannot be differentiated one from the other.
I agree.
By the normal human eye.
Okay, same thing. This one's masonry elements. Well, this one says should not be painted or coated.
I think that's, here I think we're saying you don't alter the color that the material itself comes in.
Which is what
Wait a
the
minute,
first
see what
first
we're-
sentence says.
Looking at the red, right? That's it.
Well, not all brick is red.
Sorry, red ink on the page.
Oh, yeah.
I think the second sentence is to cover structures that were painted prior to the time of the.
And we have occasionally approved painted brick.
Yeah, we have, because it matches the other painted brick on the house. Yeah. Okay, any questions to that one? Next. That's a color palette issue, same story, Alex. Next. Color palette, reworded. Next. And this is standards, ooh, color scheme. Again, the palette. One must equal, whoa, that one's got a must in there. Each
This-
shutter.
Yep, this is the same shutter language, it's just for.
That's the one we said
new-
before.
New
We left
construction.
we left those at that, so I have no issue with that.
Should this say not congruous or not appropriate? We don't have a standard for appropriateness.
Right, I don't know how it originally ended up in not appropriate. Alex, you got any thought?
There was a house that was proposed that had multiple front-facing garages.
Well, and it can, it's not congruous, and we can say it's more congruous than it would be if they took it away that way, or there's, another way to go to it. I mean, we always have the right to,
Not acceptable.
And we approved one with a detached garage that was way down the back of the property, but front-facing, because there was almost no other way for them to do it.
And is it not our intent to make it so that there are not multiple facing
Correct.
garages? So we just say, no, you can't do that. It's not acceptable.
front-facing garages are not appropriate.
There's not a zoning prohibition against that, I don't think, or is there?
I don't think the PDO says anything to it.
So if the
us.
standard is that it's not allowed and they want to do that, then they would bring it to you.
Right. Then it would have to come to us, because then we need an exception.
It's saying the same thing.
If
It's
we
just
grant
different
an exception.
terminology, how you want it to read.
I think it's fine the way it is, but
What's the matter with that dominate the facade?
I don't know.
Because I couldn't figure out,
It actually seems to provide
Was that-
guidance to us if you put,
I couldn't, because garages as attached structures are not supposed to be higher than this, so how does the garage dominate the facade?
Well, I think
Unless you have
if you
three.
have
Subjective, I
a
mean.
big garage in front and then the house is.
you can have
way
one
back.
garage facing the front with that statement. It just says you can't have more than one.
If you say multiple front-facing garages that dominate the facade are not appropriate, that suggests multiple front-facing garages that don't dominate.
Are appropriate.
Are appropriate.
Yeah, that's why.
That's not what we're saying.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
right, I agree.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was my thinking, yes, thank you.
So that's going to stay as it is, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Strict change, yep.
Next. This actually will get faster here shortly, folks. It's not going to go forever.
And this was a clarification there, just that.
Plywood siding, fine. Vinyl siding. Materials considered a project. Okay. I'm just looking at the last
Does this
sentence.
prohibit asphalt shingles on the roof, not on the wall?
Following materials and treatments are not permitted for
Siding.
new construction in the plan historic. So it would be all the way around, I would say, wouldn't it?
But it says asphalt or asbestos siding or shingles. I assume that means asphalt shingles.
What you're saying is asphalt or asbestos siding or
Asphalt or asbestos shingles.
Yes.
asbestos shingles.
You could just
Either
take,
or.
you could just take asphalt out, because I assume no one's doing asphalt siding anyway. I think.
No.
Well, now
But asphalt shingles would be permitted, I think.
Common, that's all we do.
Right.
As roofing, yeah, that and metal. Yeah, just asbestos siding or shingles.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is bar the asbestos, right?
Right.
That's the concept, not,
I would hope so.
I'm not sure you could buy those anymore anyway.
yeah, one, I'm not sure you can buy them. Two, I'm not sure you'll find a whole lot of people to even install them if you did find them.
Not to.
I can't imagine that ever being proposed before this commission in the past.
Besides, I'm not sure.
Ever?
From a purely historical point of view, you could use asbestos shingles because they're out there. I mean, so it's kind of beyond our scope, but it's okay.
Delete asphalt or.
Yeah. Next. Next.
You got to tell the computer next. I can only scroll so many times.
I'm talking to whoever's turning the computer, and I think it's,
It's me.
We're good.
you're
Yeah.
doing it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I mean,
Nope.
it's gonna scroll to the bottom in a second if I'm not careful.
Why don't we, let's let Tom drive and then pick on him.
Yeah, let's do it.
There you go.
Pass it down.
Good.
Yeah, there you go. Paint colors must be in the palette. That one's okay. Next. So what you're trying to tell me is the computer's a little slow?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
A little? That's on.
Well, I was trying to be nice. And the same, reword that one if necessary. Okay,
Good.
good.
Same change, right?
Yeah. Same change if it's not correct.
Hold on right there. Number 8. You're saying you must paint a new structure. Suppose it's brick.
Must be in colors.
You could put new buildings if painted,
Must be.
must be in color palette.
Okay.
Got that, Alex?
How about painted new buildings?
Okay, painted new buildings, that
Or,
works.
or do they
Right.
just need to be in the color palette, whether they're,
Yeah.
And I don't want to open up the possibility someone
argument,
builds a
it-
new building and
I think they got that covered.
doesn't paint it at all.
All right, yeah, we go back to the same thing, you're right. I
buildings must be in colors that are in the Village of Pine
don't know
Ridge
if I
Color
use
Palette.
like Hardy plank and it's already pre-painted and or material like that, I don't care how it got painted, it's the right color. Okay, next.
Oh, see? Look.
That one,
Skip a page?
Oh, yeah, we skipped like 4 pages.
okay, that's the last page right there.
Are you sure?
Yep.
All right.
That's fine.
Side quip, this is not, at some point, I'm sure someone's gonna swap out some of these photos, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Higher
yeah,
resolution and
yes,
all that.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
got it. Okay, moving on.
Good point.
Like the bottom one, though, 1957.
I mean, Kevin Drum's probably like, I've remodeled that place. Morning, you still got the old stuff in there.
This is where we start moving, Alex?
I think we have been moving quite good pace, actually.
Another paint palette thing, you can straighten the words
I'm
out
pretty sure that's all the changes you're going to see from here on
Yeah.
out.
for a while. Oh, what's that?
Want to know who caught that one?
What?
Go up to the,
64, yeah, go back up.
okay.
Computer's gonna play nice, we will go backwards. You're confusing it,
I
okay.
know, right?
Down, just
They're right here.
down a little farther,
We'll talk about pools later, I know.
yeah.
Planning on defining it.
Signage colors must be. And should be muted in.
What if I'm in the
hue.
color and I'm not muted in hue? I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand.
if that's possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what muted is and what muted
So
isn't.
if you have a color that's in the palette, how do you mute it and keep it the same color?
Now you're getting to me, that whole last part of it, I can't.
So muted means, it'd be this, muted in hue is in line with saying earth tone colors. So it should be natural colors that are muted, meaning not neon, not fluorescent.
Either in the palette or it isn't in the palette.
I agree.
Is signage a minor?
We could just stop the sentence right there at palette.
No,
It could be.
It could be.
Okay, but, so if it's going to be minor, I think we need to look at this a little more closely, but.
In what way?
Well, that gives more guidance to the staff.
Yeah, but that's it, we can go do it.
Yeah, that's
Is
what-
this
that's
good
what-
enough, is this good enough for the change we
For
want?
right now, sure. yeah.
Okay.
I guess I want to tag on to what you just said. Is it reasonable, and what you just said? I can imagine a sign using colors in the palette, which none of us would vote for,
Okay,
which means maybe there's something we should do about that and have a separate palette for signage.
building a whole new
but would
empire?
that, if they're in the palette, wouldn't that same problem arise, not with signage, but with the color I paint my house?
Signage is more restrictive than having a house, the massing wise, you
Yeah.
would think.
But, for example, I think there's a sign that has some bright red in it. Is bright red allowed?
Not muted.
Color palette?
Yeah, I don't know how
not
bright a red is.
But that's
Yeah,
like
I mean, that,
Like a bank?
I mean, then it goes back to, I think, our judgment call on some of this, because I don't know how you're going to define the right ones, given the building it's on. Some buildings will handle a bright red printing it, and other buildings won't handle that. So those are things, I don't see how you can get much more defined on it. I mean, you can't regulate everything. You kind of got to give it some broad things, and that's why we're quasi-judicial again. We go back and apply.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it depends whether it's minor or major. Right now, it's major, I guess, right?
Not all signage, no.
No, some signage, minor change to a signage would not be, as long as it's in the color palette.
But the size of signage is relatively restricted, so it's not like you're going to have an 8
Right.
by 10 screaming, whatever.
Our
Withdraw my
signage zoning regulations are very restrictive and say the same thing, that it's got to be in the color palette as well.
Going to be in the color palette one way or the other. So I think unless we want to, I mean, it's,
Maybe if you could get an example of that color for us to discuss when we start talking more
Okay,
about
I'm
it.
just saying like a bank. I mean,
do you want to go back to should on this one, because that's what it was, or do you want to leave it at must for this change?
I don't mind the must part, I mind the muted hue part.
Okay, well, that's,
I've already
then
stricken
add that to our list of things to work on, because that's not in this change.
Right,
I thought it was just-
right now, I've got the sentence stopped after palette.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, consistent with everything else we've talked about. today.
We have a relatively, pretty consistent description of color and its application to materials of one kind or another.
Okay. So we're going to leave it, then you're going to strike the words and, everything after and? Okay, everybody happy with that? Happy as they can be? Okay, good. Next.
Found that.
I did.
Wow. Kudos.
What is this thing? Oh, this is,
You didn't found the American Soda Foundation.
oh, okay. Got it. It's history. All right. And these are certificate appropriate checklist. Alex, have you gone through this? Is this,
I'm catching up, 1 second.
okay,
There we go.
certificate appropriateness checklist. This is the checklist they would use in preparing the application, is that correct?
Correct, and a lot of this is just updated for our online permitting that we're
Right.
doing.
Okay.
I want to work with you a little bit on that, too.
Okay.
And I think this is going to need some more work on it that would help us back with what we were talking about before in what needs to be in the package and so on and so forth. So I think, but I think these changes are,
Well, there's an application form you guys have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
it's online now. It's online now.
Right.
It's both, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I get concerned about when I'm looking at these applications is there a narrative there that kind of sets forth everything that they're doing?
Right.
Some of that
Nice
writing.
summary, yeah. So,
That's what I'm saying. This, I think, needs more work, but I don't see anything in here that's inappropriate or not that we can't change.
This is a good intermediate step. It's not a final step.
Right. And then we need to add that to the list of things to work on as well.
Just keep in mind, we're not going to find a cure-all here.
No.
There's no way, because major work items considered by this commission, two very important points I would like to make are, you're running the gambit of anything and everything that could be proposed for exterior changes in the historic district that could come before you. So having a rigid checklist could be impossible. Second of all, because of the nature of quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings, staff are really not to lead or coach an applicant to prepare anything to be forwarded to this commission or at that hearing, and they have to sink or swim
Right,
on their
on
own
their own
accord.
merits.
Yeah.
But I think offering something, a
It
general
helps.
checklist would help them as much as anything else. We may, at some point, want to, and it may be in there already, say, hey, this is a general checklist, this is not the end-all type stuff. This is to help you prepare in doing it. And if you follow it, you're more likely to be where you need to be than if you don't follow it.
I just don't want to have some false sense amongst the commissioners that we can fix every issue that that you've
And that's
got.
why I'm saying I think it needs more discussion, but does anybody, back to my question, does anybody see anything on here that isn't acceptable for where we stand right now, that's incorrect or an error on?
I think our message to council is that we are changing things because the statute has changed, guidelines, and where we can clarify things to make it easier for applicants. So by
This is
referencing
kind of some of
specifically
this
the
stuff is-
online center, well, that didn't exist 5 years ago, so now it does, so we want that in there.
Right. I think that's, but I think in term, is there anybody that see anything that's not acceptable?
I don't really think we've addressed anything where we've significantly changed context or content.
Not,
It is all clarification in one way or
it's
another,
wording or clarification of some kind.
and consistency between different parts of the document.
Anybody got anything else on this one? Yeah.
What was that on there? We went back to.
The
three-
third bullet
three.
says
Okay,
4
there's
weeks.
a, then the third one down says 3 weeks prior to.
We're gonna keep 3 for now is what we decided above, I think, until we can figure that out, right?
Is there any reason, would it be reasonable to add a reference, I'm looking at the third bullet from the bottom, bring photos of,
And again, I think there's,
properties, would it be reasonable to make reference back to the comment that says just because you can find a photo doesn't mean by approval?
I think if we put it in there, I think those kinds of things would be to take into consideration, but at this point, that's not incorrect, I don't believe, is the way it's stated.
Right.
And I think for what we've got to this point, let's do it this way, would be my recommendation, and I'm not the only vote, obviously. And then put it on a list of things we got to do some more hashing out. Does that make sense? Yes? No?
No, again, this is just a checklist, this is a summary. Someone who's really serious about this should read the applicable sections of the document. It will be clear, the fact that you can find one doesn't mean you're home free.
And again, none of this is a requirement.
No, again,
Applicants are encouraged to provide this information to bolster their case.
this is just a tool to help you. You know, if you follow it, you'll be closer to what you need. You may not be there, but you're closer to what you need. And so I kind of just, that's the concept. And again, there is no one size that's going to fit all in here. So let's add it to the list to talk about in the future.
It's a 16-ounce hammer as opposed to a 10-ounce hammer.
Yeah, there you go. Okay? Oh, this is just changing the statute.
Updated the
number.
URL.
Nothing there. Other than the computer thing, so, okay, what's R? Rear yard.
This was a comment that Ann had made back in June, and we lifted during the creation of this document originally in that glossary, the same language in the development ordinance for front and side yard. However, rear yard was left out for, so this is the language that is currently in the PDO.
The word main, second to last word, suggests that some minor part of the house could be ignored.
Or a detached garage that sat behind the house.
Yeah, so that,
Primary
again,
structure.
yeah, it's what's what it is, primary building.
Can we
They're-
change main to primary?
We can if it,
Sure, if that makes you happier, we'll change main to primary.
Okay.
Happy with primary, or you want it to be structured? What's consistent with, is this the PDO, straight out of
Yes.
PDO?
Main building or primary structure.
It's,
they're saying the same thing. To me, I would read it, interpret it the same.
I guess I'm looking for ways that an applicant may read it the way we don't want.
oh, come on. We got
And
enough
they
time
will
to
run
talk
into
about all
trouble
of those
later.
things that are in here. But, I mean, worth considering, but,
Just a thought.
okay, next.
What would rear, or, I mean, main or primary? What did we decide on?
My vote's main.
You're right, leave it main.
Oh, sorry, my vote is primary.
I don't think anyone is.
Primary then.
Primary's fine.
That's fine. If that makes you happier, we'll do that one just for you, Dan.
Happier by the minute.
Next.
That should be it.
I hate to tell you this, but that's the last page.
We're done.
Oh, that's the last page?
Oh, wait, I can.
Hey!
I'll make more of that.
Yeah, you,
Oh, we got more things to talk about. A whole bunch more things.
All right, so we'll,
Does anybody have any other questions about anything in this document? Otherwise, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve what's in here, and it will go up, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the village council said they would consider this, assuming they got it early enough, for the next village council meeting, which is when, do you know?
Tuesday, 28th.
Tuesday, the 28th. Okay, well, it's their decision whether they want to do it Tuesday or they want to wait till the next one. It's not ours, but we're gonna make them, if we agree with everything that's here, we're gonna make a motion to that to send it up to the village council for approval, and if they don't like something in there, I'm sure they'll send it back and have us look at it again.
And I think as long as we represent to them that the nature of this is either changing things per the statute or clarification, I think they will approve all that.
I hope you're right. But the worst case is they're going to send it back and ask us to look at something again, which is fine. That's their prerogative.
Now that we know how they looked at it last time, we will be more structured in how we present it to them this time.
Okay? Do I hear a motion to approve these for forwarding to the,
You need more of a motion than that? Because I would move that the Historic Preservation Commission adopt all of the changes in the documents that we've discussed today, with the exception of the one or two that we agreed to take out for further consideration.
second? Any discussion? I'll do a roll call, please. John?
Aye.
Richard, I.
Dom, aye.
And I,
David, I.
Passes. Unanimous.
Off the record, which did you?
There
just
is no
try?
off the record while these things are on.
Which biscuit?
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
that-
you can leave that on the record.
A white one and a chocolate chip one.
The pink ones were raspberry filled. They're very
Let's,
nice.
if people want, take a 5-minute break and we'll come back, cookie break, restroom break, whatever, and then we'll tackle the next thing that's up for the story.
I didn't have any of those. I'm gonna grab another one.
There you go.
I mean, it is the weekend.
have our microphones in better shape, we can move on with this. And I believe the next section should be new business, and that is one that I believe Alex is going to present, or somebody's, you're going to present some information to us to consider on this matter. Is that correct?
That is correct. So
You have the floor.
this PowerPoint or this presentation is going to go through and further explain and call out individually the information from the Excel sheet that I sent you all. And what that is stating is moving a few things from different categories into other categories or rewording to simplify, kind of take some of the fluff out that's getting applicants hung up. So this overview, we're going to go through the reclassifications, some of the standards that are relative to those classifications, as well as some content edits.
By reclassification, you mean what?
Moving from basic to minor, minor to major, major to basic, all of that. So
Okay.
classification of that particular project that they're wanting, what type of work is it? What type of COA? So the very first one,
Can you go back one slide, please?
yes.
That was our house, yeah. It was the Cottage Colony Schoolhouse. It was run as a schoolhouse from 1918 until 46 or 7 for people who stayed at the hotel or in the cottages for several weeks but had children. Couldn't put them in Pinehurst Elementary, so they brought a full-time school teacher down from Shaker Heights, Ohio. And in the summer, when nobody was here, she went up to Columbia Teachers College to stay current on things. And you could take a second grader and a seventh grader and all take them up. We're going to be here 3 weeks.
It's kind of like the one-room classroom.
Wow. No, it's right on the corner.
It's
a
beautiful.
Corner lot.
It's a pretty house.
That's taken from the street. That's my picket fence. I built that gate.
That's the little things in the front.
I did.
Okay,
I knew these picture
All right,
changes would be a
let's-
hit.
thank you for the education, Ken.
That's
I
great.
appreciate it.
All right, so this is the very first one. We're looking at basic work here. Currently, it states repair in kind of gutters and downspouts. What I'm recommending changing it to is repair gutters and downspouts. When you take out the in kind, the repairing them, repair is not, hey, let me replace this or put new. It's repair, and that's further defined.
Okay, and I'm just using this one as an example of, just so I make sure I understand it. Because what you're taking out is the in-kind, right?
Correct, so you're stating repair gutters and downspouts.
Right. So that's what you're going to. So repair doesn't allow me to change things, is what you're saying.
Or
Well,
replace them.
if you so choose to change it, there are other standards you would then have to meet.
Okay. Okay, so that's the concept.
I'm sorry, we're talking about basic work.
This is under the basic work classification. So
Yeah.
back in the guidelines, under the section where it lists the standards for basic work, you'll see where it'll say repair in kind of gutters and downspouts. I believe it's the fourth one listed under basic work. And
Kind is duplicative because if I was putting up something different, it would be replace, not repair.
correct.
Okay.
If I go to something other than basic work, is there a sentence in there that says,
It wouldn't be under basic work. That's the only thing that's allowed to that you can do to gutters under basic work without having to pay money. There you go. How do you like that?
I guess I would say that if I'm an applicant and I'm repairing my gutters and downspouts, and I'm starting with a square downspout, and I'm repairing that stupid old square downspout with a round downspout,
You can't do that. You have to replace it.
where does it
Wait,
say
wait,
that?
so
Because we
the-
took out the in-kind.
The minor work language then, which would trigger, if you're doing that, is a new installation, which we can talk about that language when we get the minor work to, so that would be a new installation, or a new installation or change in gutters and downspouts. would be
I'm
a
an,
minor
I'm
work.
putting myself in the applicant's shoes, and I'm saying, no, I'm not adding a downspout, I'm just repairing this stupid one and make one that works. So
If
you're
you're
replacing.
replacing it with something different, then it's not a repair.
that's why I think it's important to keep the in-kind there, to make it clear.
Can I just take a step back? Alexandria, you're going to be walking us through then all these, the whole section and what you're proposing for changes, is that it?
That is correct, and it was
Okay.
also, that Excel, I don't know if you all have the Excel sheet, if not, we can get you some more copies, but the the areas, it's where there's redundancy. So it's where something isn't further detailed, called out, or specifically indicated, where there's a redundancy or the information and the wording is getting applicants kind of stuck up.
So you're going through
this.
all of these then with a fine tooth comb?
Not
Is that
all
what
of
you're
them.
doing?
Not every
No.
single one, only
But
the
where you
ones that
think-
are. Mhm.
Okay.
And there are several, so.
I'm just picking this one apart, just so we understand
Well, and
how it is. We maybe, then I think it'll make the rest of them go a little quicker once we get our feet on the ground.
Back to basic work for a second. How do you know basic work's being done?
Technically, you don't.
Okay. All right.
You,
So
you,
just
you
starting-
might not.
You might not.
You
I
might
can't
not.
say you don't. I mean, if the building inspector walks by and seeing you doing it, then you might get done it. But otherwise, it's, I go out in the backyard and replace the downspout, and there you go.
I could not count more than maybe on one hand how many times people in the historic district, Richard, quit looking at me like that, some work to their home without first calling the village. It's pretty well. There really aren't any issues, but there's where staff has that initiation and that conversation with what you're going to need, what are you doing, let me see, and then we can determine, as we do with a minor work or a major work, what application you're going to need or what approval you're going to need, if any. And some of that you'll see in reasoning why we're proposing to move, I know one item specifically from a basic work to a minor work, because it requires more than someone on the phone just, yeah, I'm just
Yeah, so-
keeping everything the same, I
So if
promise.
somebody calls Alex and says, I want to fix my gutters. And Alex's first question is going to be, well, what do you mean by fix? What are you actually going to do to the gutters? I'm going to replace the downspout. Okay, if you replace it with the same thing there, have a ball. If you're going to replace it with
the point-
anything
the point
other than
is-
the same thing,
You just said is why I think it's important to leave the in-kind there.
Well, hold on, can I
But
please?
Alex has
But
it.
the next one down,
The
look at
next,
one down.
yeah, this is something I was wanting to state. So let me
you look
read
here.
these in order as they are right now in our standards. Repair in kind of gutters and downspouts, replacement of gutters and downspouts where replacement materials match the existing materials in detail and color.
it's already in there in another place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I withdraw my stupid comment.
trust me, I had one of those last night.
So are we good with this?
I'm
Is
good with that.
everybody-
All right,
Okay.
now, but I think we now understand how this might work.
All right, well, I'm going to throw a few curveballs at you. All right, so in this one, it states removal of dead or diseased trees along the street front that are not in the right-of-way. So currently, this is in the basic work. I believe that we should move this to a minor work, so that way we can potentially implement a documentation or some way that staff has to show that it is, one, in the right-of-way, and that we're making sure we're verifying the correct tree, as well as the dead or diseased statement. This is simply a recommendation, whether you all want to implement it.
I agree.
So just because I'm dense,
That's fine.
if somebody calls Alex and says, my tree's sick, I'm cutting it down.
So if somebody calls me and says, hey, can I cut this tree down? It's in the right-of-way.
Well, no, let's just, that
The
one's
right
easy.
of way is the village.
That part's easy.
Well-
Suppose they say it's diseased.
If it's diseased, right now, we would, at this moment, have to take their word for it, or we'd go out, meet them, and look at it. But then, are you going to take my word for it, or do we want something that's documented with said application to then record that
That's why you want to move it from basic to minor.
to minor?
So, oh, never mind, because it's not an issue.
And the parameters of
My
document.
question was the money that's involved in that, but that's not our problem.
Certainly something to raise at the right appropriate time, if you wish.
So,
Yeah, this is not part of this discussion.
But the impetus for this change is to improve the process
And
by
documentation.
requiring someone to say, yeah, an arborist came out and said, that tree is sick.
Do they actually have to submit something?
We would require that, or we would not approve it.
correct.
If it goes to minor work, they have to submit, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is, everybody's okay with this?
Yes.
Okay. So in this one, minor work, this is, I think, where, just again, condensing it to installation of mechanical and utility equipment.
So you're presuming that all the other things, heating, HVAC, what have you, is included in the above?
Correct. I mean, HVAC, heating,
Mechanical and
those, that is
utility equipment includes all of that others, as far as I can see.
Can anyone think of any equipment that would not be mechanical and utility? It's above my pay grade for certain.
I'm sure somebody can come up with that, but I would say that's a huge percentage of it, if nothing else.
Private well enclosure it's not mechanical or utility, it's a cover.
It's part of the utility equipment, the cover.
We have one on our property at 110, and it's 110 short, it's just a cover. I mean, you can pick it up and move it. It looks like a little chicken.
Based rock, fake rock, or?
I'm fine with it, simpler better.
Yeah, I think it's easier.
I think, well, I'm fine with it.
Okay?
And
We'll concur?
All right, and so, and these are current minor works, by the way, sorry, should have probably clarified. So currently we have new parking area, walks and driveways, looking at parking area, walks and driveways, new is implied.
Yeah, I agree.
Is this discussion saying that we are approving this because we're not,
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
well, the language was provided, though. I don't have it with me tonight, but.
We're talking about changing the language from what's on the left side to what's on the right side. That's all we're talking about.
Except for that, the language we're changing is not actually here. We're just being told that it's being simplified. No, that's not the language.
So that is the language, oh, sorry, that was loud. So new parking area, walks and driveways, that's the current language right now in the book.
That's all we're
parking-
changing is on top. Ah,
Correct, yes,
Bottom stuff is just,
Fine.
yeah.
is, yes, staff
Looking at
explanation.
the words
of
on
it.
the top line.
So addition of fences, walks, and columns, or walls, sorry, going fences, walls, columns. Good? All right, I'll keep rolling. Again,
Just mechanically, if they weren't adding, under what circumstances would this come up? Does this cover repairs to existing fences and so forth?
repairs are actually covered in basic work and it's outlined. New is covered in major work and it's outlined. So this is literally, would imply if you're doing anything other than,
New, change, replacing.
If you're adding a fence, walls, or a thing, it's fence, walls, or things for minor work.
Addition of just seems just odd. It just doesn't flow with.
To me, addition means there isn't one there now and I want to put one on.
or you
Correct,
could,
so-
you could actually imply it as there is one
Or
and I'm doing an
I'm
addition.
extending it, yeah.
Or adding a section to it, or,
It's exactly what we did with paint, color, and scheme earlier. Just
Yeah.
everything falls under that fence.
Same with this. It's
look
literally
at the
taking
list.
addition of.
If you have the section with you, of the way it's written right now, it'll make much of this will make more sense to you than it does if you're just trying to read it without putting in context. Really does make a difference. Anything else you want to look for a second, John? Or are you good with what it says? Okay.
And to give some clarification, the 06, that's original verbiage, and this is the sixth item. N6 would be new verbiage, sixth item. So I was just trying to keep it organized and clean.
Okay, great. I'm not sure I'd have figured that out, but
I was admiring the typography.
Like the graphics,
Yeah, very nice. No idea what it meant, but
all I knew is we were changing the words on the top lines.
So existing, you see the X going from, this is my explanation of why, what it is now versus what we're going to with the green check marks.
And we will also be proposing to enumerate the basic work, minor work, and major work, so it will actually
We're not-
have numbers instead of
a good
a bullet
idea.
next to it.
Okay.
All right, so minor work. Installation of accessibility ramps and exterior fire exits. Installation of light, because the new terminology now is life safety and accessibility features.
Is that a statutory change or?
sense, yes.
Back to one of
In-
my.
in- Yeah, well, there is, if you go back in, and again, we can look at it again later, but the statute now basically says that if the building inspector or equivalent, so I'm taking like fire inspector and those people, say that we need something on there, we can't block that any longer.
No,
What do you mean it says
We,
that?
we can ask them to modify it, make it look different, but we cannot say that, like, and I know what one you're talking about, you're gonna talk about the big stairs going up the back of the white,
Right.
of the white thing.
Right.
We
And
can't,
I might point out, just as a point of information, that there are some huge fans on that roof that have never been screened. Just saying.
okay.
Project's not complete yet.
But what it says is that what we can ask for, it has to be certified by the building inspector or the fire inspector that it needs to go up. In other words, the applicant can't just walk in here and say, well, the fire inspector told me I had to put stairs up.
I
We
wouldn't
can
be in a
ask for
position to
certification,
say-
but if
yeah.
it's certified, it's,
It
we
wouldn't
don't.
matter to me if the fire department said you had stairs or the owner just wants stairs. All we're talking about is if you're going to have stairs, it has to look like thus and so.
Right, but we can't block the stairs, is my point.
We can block the stairs if the owner wants, or we can't if the fire marshal wants.
That's right. Because if the fire marshal comes in and says, these are the stairs and these are what they need to be,
But,
and he certifies them.
but under our standards, they should be designed to be compatible in character, material, scale, proportion, location, detail, and finish with the building and existing.
Well, it doesn't,
We still follow that step, right? So we still make those determinations. On the back end, fire marshal is the final say.
That's right.
And can kibosh whatever.
in other words, we can't just say it's not congruous, and therefore you can't put them up.
So back to this. Richard, I misspoke a moment ago. Is this suggesting that if the fire marshal says, as an example, for life safety reasons, you must install stairs, suddenly it becomes minor work and we don't have
No.
a shot at that?
It still has to meet the standards.
It still has to meet standards.
Just new updated language.
You just can't
So
block it.
what we really need.
It's like on a demolition. We can do all kinds of things, but we can't stop the demolition.
So if this is minor work, then when you're looking at it, you're looking at the standards?
So what I was just getting ready to get to is yes, as we talked about in the previous agenda item, any minor work, if staff is to approve any minor work item, it must meet every single applicable standard, or we couldn't approve it. And it has to be objective. So what we're seeking tonight is, first baby step is,
Yeah, okay.
are you guys on board with some of these proposed changes? And then we have to go back and pull, Alexandria's already worked on this. We didn't want to show it to you because it could make your eyes go back and forth right now. But there's this matrix of every single, okay, if you're proposing a deck, okay, well, every single guideline is pulled out of there and I'll go here, okay? So then we can reference each guideline and make sure that it's drafted in a way that we can apply it objectively.
Right.
So then the next step is going to be, we're going to be bringing some revised language.
What we are approving is the conceptual shift from one category to another, not the specific language that will cover it, which will
Yes.
come back to us another time.
This has got to be otherwise we could go on this, we could march toward changing this language. and
This is not
you guys
something
not
we're
agree with
voting on
this.
tonight to go
This has
to
to be
village council.
made more
Gotta be-
specific,
it's
right?
gotta
I
be
mean, 'cause
tightened
the way
up.
it's written now, so.
And the statement that this work must meet all requirements is right at the top of
Yeah.
all these things.
Yeah.
Because if they can't
When we say-
objectively meet every one of those requirements, then they would normally disapprove it, but you don't disapprove it, it has to come to us instead, because we're the only one that can disapprove a minor work item.
Question for you, Alex.
So if they meet 100% of it,
Scrutiny,
it goes
item
through.
by item,
If it
until
don't,
you
it
get
comes
to
to
a
us.
should. Then what?
Is that correct?
Okay.
Is that correct? If you can't objectively show where they meet everything, then it comes to us.
Not a minor work?
Not, well, okay,
It is
call it
at
what you
that
want, but
point
it comes to us,
elevated,
yes.
correct. Mhm.
You're right.
And to also clarify, part of what we're going to be doing after we go through these is I want direction from you all in prioritizing which sections you feel that based on these changes, we're going to start looking at those standards to strengthen them so that the board and the community feel comfortable with the decisions we make at a minor level. So know that this is just the first step of identifying what we're changing. The second step is going to be to prioritize a list of what changes need to be made and to create that timeline that for staff, myself, to do that. So,
This one's more important than this one.
So currently in minor work, construction of an arbor water feature, not including pools, pergola and/or trellis that will be located in the rear yard. What we're proposing that to be worded as is new arbor water feature, pavilion, pergola, or trellis that will be located in the rear yard.
Does that include a swimming pool then?
That is not included. Swimming pools actually have their own section, so it would automatically.
Think of like a fountain.
But they're not enumerated. Swimming pool is not enumerated here, so it shouldn't be covered by this.
There is a section that talks about swimming pools.
There's a slide for that coming up.
Yes, we'll get there.
Okay. I keep getting sidetracked by other questions, and I have a new one.
What?
So suppose somebody wants to build a, right one here, let's say pergola. And it's in the rear yard, it's behind the house, that is, behind the back line of the main structure, primary structure. But you can clearly see it from the street. Does it still get a free ride?
Not a free ride, that's a
Look at the
minor
standards.
work.
That's where we'll look at the standards.
And we
Yes.
would go back to the standards and see what it says. And that's where we're going to have to work on clearing up the standards to make sure that's now clear, which won't hurt even the things we look at to have a clearer standard.
Right.
And I think also speak to that idea that if you can't see it from the main street, if it's on the rear and no one can see it, maybe that should be minor work in general.
And I guess to strengthen that, John,
And then it goes to major work.
being
if
able
it's
to
not.
see it does that mean a pure elevation, or?
I understand.
Well, if they have a question about it, then it comes up to us. It's just that simple. If it isn't clear to Alex, then it's got to come to us. That's the only other two options. Either they approve it because it's absolutely right, or it comes up to us to
Take the
argue.
direction to Alex and his crew to be as unambiguous as possible.
That's our job.
You want it too.
That's our job.
Yeah,
That's what their job is already in this. That's
We-
not new news.
If we exercise discretion, we are running afoul of the statutes. We could get
Well,
in
yeah,
hot
because
water
then
for
you
that.
get it, then what you get into is the quasi judicial issue. He cannot make a quasi judicial decision because he has no authority whatsoever to deviate from anything other than exactly what it says.
There are-
If it has to be deviated, it has to come us because we're the only ones with the authority to deviate from the standard.
And I think, David, to your
Staff
point,
cannot.
it would be up to us to decide is the degree to which it could be
Yes.
seen material or not, objectionable or not, et cetera.
That's the whole purpose of quasi judicial, is that's why we have to take testimony, facts, figures, et cetera, and make the decision, because there's some questionable part of it. If it's unquestionable and the standards are clear that allows them to make a good, solid, unquestionable deal, they make the decision, we're fine. If Alex and company says they can't, then guess what?
Got it.
It comes to us.
So the next one is addressing signage. No reason to have addition of new and/or replacement. It should just be signage. Painting a surface a different color that is consistent. Again, painting consistent with the Village of Pinehurst color palette.
How about?
You
how
skipped
about-
one.
Let me back up. I'm going to drag this thing out forever. I only have an hour left, so, okay. Do we need the word painting at all? Aren't we just saying colors, consistent with the Village of Colors?
Person's asking
I'm
to
just
paint.
coming back to focus on the word paint. There are a lot of ways.
Yeah, it could
Asking
be,
to
if it, yeah, I understand. If it could be stain, it could be something else. So just, the color needs to be consistent with the Village of Pinehurst color palette.
Resurfacing,
Refinishing or.
Reason I
painting
think-
or staining, I mean,
But I think the differentiation here would be, there's something that exists. If you replace it with something else that's not covered by this, whether the thing you replace it with comes in that color as produced or not, versus it's green now and I want to paint it blue, it's got to be a blue that's in the color palette.
We can also word
Is
this,
it from painting to refinishing?
I was gonna say, we can,
Fine with that.
well, refinishing would imply that it's already finished.
maybe painting, staining, refinishing, or the like.
Painting surfaces
Color has to
Must
end
be
up being
consistent.
consistent with,
And think, it's really honestly going to be just if something's being painted or stained. Because if anything else, there's going to be a change in material, so therefore it's another level of review that's going to apply and not this. Painting or staining, can we just go with that? Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Alexander, you kind of skipped over the new installation of gutters and downspouts. No, I mean, you didn't put it there, but I mean, on the list here of minor work. Just wondering how that jibes with replacement of gutters and downspouts on the basic work. Sure you thought that through.
This is
What
a
do
new
you-
installation, it's not a replacement.
So the basic work, if that was one of the earlier slides, that was,
Right.
that was repair, I thought, was the language.
Right.
in
So you
there.
got two, you got repair and then you have replacement
Where's replace? Where's replacement
under
at?
basic work. It's 1, 2, 3, bullet 4 is repair, bullet 5 is replacement. Then in minor work, you have new installation.
So under basic work, yes, you have repair and then replacement of the exact. And then under minor, are you inquiring about,
Well, it says new installation of gutters and downspouts.
Yeah, I
Seems to
think
me
we,
there's a
I think
very-
we got some duplication here.
that doesn't surprise me.
It's the
You know,
penultimate bullet on page 10.
we can just get rid of bullet 5 in basic work, and this one could cover that.
Yeah, that's fine.
The next thing, the one. Or,
I don't know, just something to think about, because it's,
Ready for the next one? Because I think this is where I lost most of you
Placement or new.
on the Excel sheet.
Did we, any other questions on this one? The painting consistent with the village, painting and staining, or staining? Okay,
All right, so with this one, the original, this is the one I chose to revise, but I want to clarify. On your Excel sheets, everything that was in green under minor is what I'm proposing to be consolidated, because I don't think that it's necessary to have new installation of gutters and downspouts, replacement of roofing material the same size and color, replacement of door. It seems repetitive, and to encompass that to where it states structural and/or architectural changes of which the design and material are consistent with the standards, meaning that they have to meet the standards. The example would be windows, siding, roof, shutters, exterior materials. So it condenses a lot of line items and just states, are you making an exterior change? Does that change meet the standard?
And if it meets the standard, it applies regardless of what it is that you are changing, whether it's a window or a door or siding.
so basically, are you guys okay with a consolidation of those items, or do you want those enumerated out separate?
well, it's kind of still enumerated, because it's, for example, blah, 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 blah.
It's included, yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's all included there, it's just a restructuring the wording, so you don't repeat that same set of words over every one of them that you put in there.
I'm conceptually fine with that.
And so this slide, this shows you those other standards that are encompassed under this. So the structural and/or architectural changes, this is now going to take the place of new installation of gutters and downspouts, replacement, et cetera.
so that's going to be the larger heading for these other these other bullets you have.
Those other
here.
bullets would no longer exist
They
as
will no
separate.
longer exist.
It would
Because
literally state
Well, they
this right here.
exist, but they exist in the top, they don't exist as an independent entity.
It's a single bullet which enumerates some, but perhaps
Oh.
not all of what are now 5 or 6 separate bullets.
Okay, I got another
See, examples, windows, siding, roof, shutters, exterior, et cetera.
So if you make any changes to your windows, any changes to your siding, the roof, the shutters, the door, any exterior changes that aren't otherwise listed in here, because everything else has a line item, this is going to take the place of the multitude of these 5 current standards.
Well, isn't that conflicting with the change? A change can be a repair, couldn't it?
Well, repairs are identified under basic.
They're
Yeah, I
specifically
know,
listed.
but
See, what
well, like
I think we
repla-
need to do, and excuse me jumping in a second, is I think once we conceptually put this together, then I want to see the final product
course, yeah.
so that it lays out, it makes sense, so that I can look at basic, I can look at minor, and I can look at that and compare. So because what I hear people saying is, well, it's not really delineated. Well, it is in the right category if you look at them like you're looking at the existing ones.
I think, I'll give you a personal experience. I put a new roof on, it was the same darn thing, and it fit under minor work instead of basic, which I think is kind of silly myself. But I went through each one of those and finally said, oh, yeah, it is minor work, because it was listed. I think it's more confusing if it's broader,
Lumped
but
together, okay?
I don't know, maybe you could just list them under that heading or something? I don't know.
Well, that's why the
I know you're trying
examples
to
are listed.
To
simplify,
change it from examples to
but
just the word standards to include, blah, 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 blah.
sometimes simplifying can be a little confusing to a homeowner who is looking for guidance, that's all.
Yes, I'd be willing to look at proposed language rather than trying to decide in a vacuum whether
Yeah.
it is or doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. The concept I agree with, I'm not sure the specific language is there. Once we work out the specific language and look at it laid out with the three of them side by side, that's when we can hammer out the,
Well, because to
The real
us,
word.
changes is different, I guess, we're supposed to know from basic work, but, I mean, repair could be a change. in a way.
Repair is not a change. Repair is literally maintaining the existing, whereas change is a physical removal and/or alteration.
If you have white lap German siding, wood, and you're repairing said white lap German sided.
with, yeah.
Structural and/or architectural changes of which the design or materials are consistent with the standards. I don't know. I just,
So you're doing.
What we could look at is making sure that the glossary or the definitions of those two words are clearly defined. Is what the difference between a repair and a change.
what should a homeowner have to do to just figure out what they have to, how they perceive that? You know?
They're not always going to, we could spell it out plain as day, and they're not going to
They're
understand
going to
it.
call and ask the
I'm,
question.
and I don't mean to, I mean, if we can take out some of that, then great. But 9 times out of 10, when people call up and, I know I got to do this, it's going to be minor work. I mean, I can't tell you how many applications we've had to send back to people because they checked minor work on the application.
What about builders? If I employ Alex Bonus when he was in the business to do this, do the builders generally have a sense as to what it is?
They have a good understanding, but 9 times out of 10, they call and they'll either ask or they'll call and say, hey, I know the deadline's next week. I'm working on a submittal package. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. That's all minor work, right? Oh, you know, and most cases, they get it, especially builder like mentioned that has a large experience working with this commission in historic district. So just run through, like, if you're proposing to change your windows, it's covered. You're proposing to change your siding. This, again, change, not
Structural
repair.
architectural.
You're going to change or add shutters.
Add a new column. You're going to do something that changes.
And then what we'll do is we'll have the standard and windows and doors changes to existing residence, section 3, you know, we'll say they've got a
Can I ask
yada,
a
yada, yada.
procedural question here?
Okay.
What if someone were, every time they were doing something to their home, they just had to fill out some like little notice? I'm doing X.
Basic work, they don't fill out anything.
Yeah, but
They can make a phone
you're
call.
saying it's, I don't know, I think there's some bleeding in between these and it's not clear
If
cut.
they could
so-
figure it out, you wouldn't need staff to.
We can give them your mailbox and they can send them to you and you can decide.
Whether to send them on to Alex or.
And then,
I have a bigger question, I think, or maybe an earlier question.
Okay.
If I'm reading this right, the sentence on top is the proposed language, right? Structural and/or architectural changes of which the design and/or materials are consistent. That's the proposed new language?
Correct.
all that
Well,
underneath
first
is
question
deleted.
is, what do you mean by are consistent? Does that mean
It should-
comply with?
That means
We-
that
we
it
sh-
has to meet the standards.
We could just change it to that meet the standards, that meet the applicable standards.
Okay, so when you're meeting the standards, when you get to a question, well, you said this is for another day, and that may be true. Suppose you get to a standard that has a should or a may in there. Now what do you do with that? The only way you can be that meet the standard means you meet all the standards, including the mays and shoulds. Is that right?
I have always been of the mindset that if recommended language in a regulatory document doesn't really have a place.
I agree.
So if it means that much
They
to
ought to be two
determining,
different documents.
and we have some ideas on that. We've been working on having like an advisory section, which wouldn't apply in meeting the standards, but having a clear standard section, whether it be objective or subjective, depending on the nature of the work. So, you want to, the idea with this document, way back in,
They were building it.
2016, 17, was let's see if we can coerce the average Joe into doing what we kind of would like them to do, even though it's not a hard requirement. That's not doing anyone
That was
a
almost
favor.
the direct wording, too, that was used at that point in time.
So again, so that's another, once we really start going through these standards, if it's important that additions not be taller than the structure, make it a requirement, make it a must.
Right.
Like we just did with the paint color. This commission just approved that very change. If it's so important that windows on street-facing elevations retain their original size and dimension, make it a must, don't make it a should. I mean, you go through this document right there, there's more shoulds than there are must.
Oh, no kidding.
So what teeth do you have with that?
Right.
Muddies the water by putting those two things together. It really, really does.
And
Because we get into the same argument or discussion, not argument, the same discussion we get in every time. Should we delineate this in the decision if it's a should or not? Well, the clearer you can make the standards, the better it is for the person doing the work, the contractor, the applicant, or anything else, and the better it is for us when making decisions.
Also in making their case.
Yeah, and when they're making their.
And providing their material and application. Well, it just says should, I'm not going to provide that, material for that.
I guess for me, on this particular one, I'm with Ann. I would not, it's oversimplified. I think it's helpful providing a bit more guidance, and I agree with Alex, take the word "are consistent," those words out and say, meet the standards or comply with the standards.
Okay, I can look at some revisions to bring to you all a few options on this particular area.
I think all of this will be subject to final language. Maybe it could even read external changes as opposed to structural and/or architectural. So that's what we're talking about. Anything that's done on the exterior facade of a building, it doesn't matter what it is, but let's see the final language.
But, so replacement here, why isn't it basic? I'm just confused.
Repair. So basically, if it's like for like, and if it's listed specifically in basic work, it's basic work. If it's a change, if it is a total replacement potentially,
You have
if it's not a
replacement of
repair.
gutters and downspouts in basic work, and then replacement of these other things?
This is in minor work?
Yeah, well, this is basic I'm talking to you about.
Correct, so that would be if that's a repair. This is not geared towards,
Yeah, but it says replacement.
I guess to put it another way, if I have a broken downspout and I replace it with a new downspout,
Right.
am I repairing it or am I replacing it?
well, let me take that one step further. If I have a front door and I replace it, does that mean I'm gonna replace it with the same kind of front door?
But
Well,
we took
how
that
about the
language
roofing
out.
material?
We took
How
the
about
language out.
the door?
Exactly. That's why standards become so important. When you replace something, you're replacing it with a new product. Whether that product is consistent with the standards or not is what will be determined with those standards. This is stating the classification of that level of work. So right now, any structural changes, if they are to meet the standards, that could be approved at a staff level. So if I'm replacing my front door, which is currently metal, with a solid wood front door, that meets the standards, therefore I'm good to go, as a minor work.
So then, in keeping with that argument, replacement of gutters and downspouts now in basic should go here.
So
No?
Yeah, there's a redundancy with bullet 4 and 5 with
Okay.
that. So that one, the longer sentence there, and in basic work needs to just go away.
Okay, or that would go there,
Correct.
maybe?
It would,
It
but
would
now
fit
in
into
essence.
that category?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, I think we've got the right concept here that we're working on.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
now have to move to the next step, which is to get it to the specific wording so that we can then work on wording and make sure that we covered things.
So does the red strike-through underline format work for this group? Because I know it confuses some, but if it works for you guys,
I can go back to it.
And I'll explain,
once we get through, of course, what we've got.
And the only thing I would add to that is I also find it useful if I have a clean copy of the proposed changes, because sometimes you get so much red in there, it's hard to read and know what the thing really says.
there's a very good reason for doing red, and let me explain what it is. When you do red line out, you know what's taken out, and you know what you're putting in. If you don't do something like red line, you're taking something out, you have no idea what was removed, and you only know what's going in, so you can only make half the decision. I mean, there's a very good reason for redlining, and it's because you can see both what's coming out and what's going in.
I just find having both is useful because
Okay, that's fine.
I
And
think
that's-
when I read the red line, I know what it is, but if I can read the accompanying proposed, just read it clean through, then I know what I'm actually going to approve.
We can do the same with the same document.
We will.
You mark comments
Marked
and
version and a
formatting
clean
off, and then do the, we can do that.
Not to rush you guys, but I have 7 minutes to get you through the next 15 slides, so.
37,
I think we
Okay.
can probably,
sadly.
Installation of small microcell wireless facilities that meet the guidelines. This is under major work. I would like to move this to, or under minor work, but it's also listed under major work, so it's another duplicate. I think it should likely just be housed under major work.
The other problem with it is the current standard for this is that small microcell wireless facilities be congruous with the historic district. The heck does that mean? How could we ever, we could never apply that standard.
never are. And if I remember right, there's some statutory wording to
This
these
is
things
changing.
as well
Yes.
that needs to be reviewed in this story.
Correct. So,
This is likely to come up more with 5G and so forth.
That's exactly what it is, yes.
You're going to see more and more of it, but it's never been, so how can it be congruous with historical things? It just is not.
And in all likelihood, these are going to be in the right of way. So would be outside the purview of staff or this preservation staff or this
Well,
commission.
we could paint or stain them in something from the color palette, that would help.
Make them look like those Christmas tree towers that they built?
There's, yeah, that's not camouflage. What's the terminology for that?
But anyway, so that would have to be major work, because I don't see any way getting into anything other than major work.
correct. All right. So this is currently listed under minor work, a 6-month extension of an approved certificate of appropriateness. So this tells me that somebody is currently working on it, they need a little bit more time, so they would like to extend their approval. I believe that that should be moved to basic because I don't think that they should have to pay an application fee for it to be a minor if they're diligently working on it and it hasn't expired yet.
Or do they get a free 6 months? I mean, they just,
If
you're
it's a-
automatic, it's
if
an
it's
automatic.
How long is the original one? It's a year, right, that it's good for?
So if it's still valid, if it's still a valid certificate of
Aren't they supposed to
appropriateness.
come to you for inspection at a certain, I mean, don't you have like a big calendar that says we have to go check the COA or no?
When it's finished, yes, when it's complete.
Yeah, this is,
Correct. Why do we need another application?
Oh, this is before they've,
Let's say they're at the 11th month, and they don't see a way of getting it done by the end
Like
of 12.
materials aren't here,
Right.
staff's not available.
wait, isn't that something you guys like to monitor?
What we would do is we would put it in writing, that it's all on us for our record keeping.
So if you went
Because,
to
because we
basic,
do this, this is also in development ordinance, say a development permit, period. If you haven't been able to move forward yet, it's a term of development permit is for 365 days. Well, if it hadn't commenced yet, the village planner can allow for an extension on that if circumstances haven't changed. What does that mean? Has the code changed? See, what we wouldn't necessarily do is what we could maybe craft or some additional language here, is if the
Then it-
guidelines hadn't changed.
Do you also have the right to deny the extension if you feel they're just stalling? They're not really making a good faith effort to get it
We
done?
can put a specific time limit on that.
but if it's basic work, you're not doing anything, I thought.
Yeah, this one,
still have to sign off on.
here's another question. Is the 12 months statutory? I don't believe it is. I would have to look. If it's statutory, then this may be an issue. If it's not statutory, then if it's something that we're allowed to make the decision on, then we may be able to consider it. But if it says 12 months, then that's another whole story, too.
This is, the 12 months is the beginning of, okay, I signed off on this, it's been approved on January 1st. All right, well, it's December 31st. I need a little bit more time to get my bids in so I can apply for the building permit. Can I have, I need one, they could say, hey, we're asking for an additional month. So this is,
Yeah, but
the
it's not
staff
your-
would
I
have to
agree
sign
with
off
Ann
on
in a
that.
sense, when you move it to basic, you're losing most of the control, right?
No, not at all. Theirs
Because they
expires.
believe, they believe that X date, January the
We will
next year. is-
document it.
Well, keep in mind, once it expires, they have to start the whole process over again.
Right.
So unless we change that expiration date, it will expire on that last day.
It seems to me basic means you guys are cut out of the process, that's why there's no fee associated? Isn't that what this?
There's no new record being created.
Right, so don't you want some kind of,
We update the current record.
For an extension.
under basic? See, I guess this is a
Under
fundamental.
under the approved certificate of appropriateness,
Right.
under that section, we'd update that section.
I mean, trust me, they'll come back at it because they think it ends in 12 months.
The work,
If it isn't extended, it did end at 12 months.
and the work originally was minor work. It wasn't basic work to begin with.
Or
This is-
it could be it could be any approved.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, this is specifically minor work, right?
No, it's right now to get an
Oh, well, then I'm-
extension, you have to file a $100 fee and get their okay.
Well, first of
Now
all-
they're saying you just, it's there, it's done.
Call and request.
First
I'd
of
like to know
all,
how you know about
let
it.
me go back one thing, and I want to clarify. Money is not our issue, okay? We do what's right because the statute
I'm
says
just
that's what we have to
Talking
do.
about that as the mode for dealing with each one of these. I'm not talking about the money itself, other than if all you're saying, because basic says you don't need any intervention
but
from
if-
anybody in the village, right?
Theirs will expire, and then they have to start over. So unless they call and say, hey, I need an extension on this, it's automatically going to expire.
Then it seems to me we need some definition or something in between where it's a notice,
Leave it
some
to my-
net
well, my
letter
work
or
is
notice or something.
Well, this is not abnormal. This is a very common thing for those who have applications, if their time frame is
Let's-
going to
We're
extend.
gonna run out of time. Let's bench this one.
No, but it leads, I mean, it kind of goes to what the category is all about.
But, and I'm not sure I understand your issue. The standard they would have to meet does not change just because they have more time to do it. So it doesn't become basic work in the sense of no standards.
But when we approve
Talking about the
something,
extension.
yeah.
Extension itself. Ann's concerned that because if we move it to basic, the village will not be informed, and the
Yeah, they will.
applicant.
No.
It's automatically a form
Hey,
because of the fact that
We could.
If
we
they
could-
let that expire, it's all over.
The point is not that it's gone. The point is there's no mechanism by
Yeah,
which
so
the village. is
here's,
notified.
we could just add language in there after getting approval by the village planner in writing.
There you go. That works.
But then it's not basic anymore, right? So.
Yeah, it
That's
still
all I'm
is,
saying.
it still is, you're just not getting yet another COA for the same darn project
No,
that you've
that-
already
I
been
have
approved
no
for. So if we
quibble
put
with
that,
that.
but we get a request in writing, we provide an extension.
That's
in
what I'm saying,
writing.
there's some hybrid category here that's not basic.
Well,
That's
let's
all I'm
see-
saying, for
let's-
process
yeah,
purposes.
I understand your point, and I think there's a lot to it, but let's see what the wording actually comes out for us. If they can make the wording do what you're talking about, then I think it's okay, but if they can't, then we may have to relook at it again. Is that?
Or basic needs to be
Yeah,
explained.
and that may be, but,
We can help that out,
yeah,
I think.
but we could sit here and argue about this for the next 30
And-
minutes
and
and get
really-
nowhere.
To the heart of the categories, in my
Absolutely
mind.
right. I'm with Ann.
And think like this, though. Basic work doesn't necessarily have to just mean that you don't have to do anything. That just means a COA is not required.
I know, but that's not what all this says.
I know,
Well,
we can work on that.
Okay,
That's-
that's fine, that's fine.
And that's why I keep going back to let's let them work the language on all three of these categories, and I think we can come up with the correct language to be able to.
And that's fine, and as you go back, maybe you look at the definitions
Absolutely, I
and
mean,
asking.
we can
Sense
implement.
to what I'm
abs-
saying?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So,
Yes.
because again, we've got to be able to clearly define what basic is, what it requires, what minor is, what it requires, and there. So that's, I think you're absolutely right in your point, but let's give them an opportunity, given that direction, to try to put some wording together that makes that work.
Everything.
If they can do that, I have no issue with doing what they're talking about.
So with this one, it kind of goes in hand. Right now, the way that the standards are is if you have a minor work changes to an approved COA, meaning, hey, we had to switch from this white to this white because they were out of this white, they discontinued it, but this is still approved underneath the standards, then we would be able to do that, and it would be a $100 fee, I think, for the application process. We would generate a new COA that indicates that change.
And again, this is going to go right in with the previous topic. It depends on how we work the basic word language, the header for that. But see,
Concept I think I'm great with, because I don't see a reason to come back to here, because we went from one of the 52 colors of white to the one right next to it in there, because that should be allowed by staff. It's clearly a staff level
But
decision.
you shouldn't just be able to do it without
But
notifying.
we can come up
Right,
with a
but that goes
system.
back to that wording, like Alex said.
and two, if you think about it like this really quickly, like look at our filing and our file organization for a particular project that changes from gray asphalt shingles to black asphalt shingles. I mean, we could have, now we have 3 different files, all related really to the same project, and we have to keep these forever because
again-
if they require a COA.
And I could appreciate that, Alex, but that's kind of like the money issue too.
That's why we're proposing this, though.
Yeah.
So that is one of the big reasons why
Driven
staff.
by Yule. So
Yes.
Yule need to come up with the language.
Okay.
Yes, and that's what they're going to
Anytime it has
do.
to do with a COA, they have to file a notice or something.
They have to get a-
All right, have we got through enough of these
No.
to give you an idea of what we need? Or there's some that, because we're kind of running on time.
I know, we're not done, and this is the easy stuff.
Okay. Well, we may not get to the hard stuff then.
Because what I would like to really address is in the major area. So as opposed to getting hung up on the little things, this is the overall concept. Don't look at it in the weeds, but look at it as a concept so I can bring you back all the details. Because without me knowing which way to go, I'm just going to end up
I
screwing stuff up.
understand,
we-
that's why I asked the question.
Should we skip the minor work and get to the major work?
Well, let me,
If these are
Let her
essentially
go
of the
through
same
it,
ilk?
and those things that we can kind of move along on, I think we can move
fine.
along on.
and if there's something you don't like, just flag it, I'll reword it, just call it out. So right now, installation of accessory buildings with no dimension greater than 12 feet, looking at new accessory buildings and structures. And this would add to the rear yard only. So this
Oh,
is
I don't
kind
like
of
that.
giving. Okay.
Not for me. Then we get back to whether you can see it or not. Your rear yard only isn't good enough.
And the problem with that is because it could be seen,
Yep.
and this commission has not turned down a single accessory structure.
Just getting warmed up.
And again, things
Give
can
us
be
some
addressed
words
in
and
the
we'll take a look
standards.
at it.
That's it,
Give us some words and we'll take a look at it.
right
Yep.
there.
Demolition of small outbuildings that are 120, this goes back to, we need to determine what that square footage is. As of right now, you all have it at 144 in the document via the changes. That's something that needs to be considered, because we need a reason.
How big a building are y'all comfortable with us issuing a minor work COA for?
12 by 12 is fine by me. But anyway,
I'll go measure my playhouse.
So
keep talking about that.
currently, this is one that, enclosure of rear non-street facing porches. This is something I would like to add in that's a little bit more specific, because again, these are existing areas that people are already, that are there. They're just wanting to enclose it to make it,
A screened-in porch in the rear.
Screened-in area.
That maybe is not visible from the street.
In a couple of those.
Yes. So if it's under roof,
I guess my sort of general feeling is that if it's not visible from the street, again, we have a question of how visible is visible, then I think all of that work should be minor.
and we can definitely take a look at that, especially as you're creating the standards, because those standards can determine what is and isn't determined as visible
Yeah, again, we're getting down, I think, where we
Yep.
need to see the actual wording.
in the
But it-
details.
And has a good point. What about the neighbors? So that's to be discussed.
No, well, well, I mean, because we all live in a historic district for,
and that's where your standard comes into play. That then at that point, it's going to be an addition that even staff can improve. It's still going to have to be same material, same roof line, same dimension windows, same materials, or whatever else we agree on. So that they would have that expectation, knowing if they ever add that as floor area.
But I think Ann's point is also the neighbors might be able to see it, even if you can't see it from the yard.
That's
from the-
why,
from-
if your standard's strong enough, that so they have that understanding. If they add on to it, it's going to look like the house anyway.
which is pretty much what we've had already that has been approved, and so it's just being consistent with the trend.
Again, it goes back to the specific wording. you use.
Correct.
I mean, you could wordsmith it together, and I just don't know how to respond to it, to be honest with you, until we
Well,
get
I
down
think
to
we're
some
getting
specific.
it. If we're hearing that you're open to some of this, then we can go back and work on that.
Yeah, 'cause I don't-
Otherwise, we could have marched on and come here and you guys just, we'd balled it
Oh,
up, thrown it trash, start over.
I'm glad you did this, don't get me wrong, I think this has been a great exercise in doing it, but I think that, and please, I'm not the only one making a decision here. I think the concept of looking at this kind of stuff is a good idea, but we can't wordsmith it at this point, because we know what the final words are gonna be.
And I want to be able to bring something back to you that you're open to and not just do what I think should be done. So
That's
this
exactly,
gives me a
thank
lot of
you.
help.
It's the same way, that's what I'm trying to say, and if I didn't say that,
And I do
that helps
thank
me.
you. This is really helpful jumping off point for all of us, I think.
And also, I think we might agree with everyone, but hypothetically not agree with this one and leave this in major, even if we like the new
Right.
wording, so.
Right, so, but again, we got to go back and look at what it really says versus, yeah, okay, this is all a good idea, and we're going to wordsmith it from the good idea, just, there ain't enough here to do that.
So this goes into the pool area that we were talking about earlier, installation of in-ground swimming pools, spa, hot tubs that are consistent with standards. So this would be where we would create those standards that are, what is a pool? A hot tub, things
Yeah.
of that nature. Where's it
Yeah.
located?
Clarifying the
So all that
definition.
would be defined and
120 square feet.
beautified
Say,
later.
dimensional standards, yes,
But
exactly.
this creates its own line item to make it far more clear in the standards.
Because right now, that is not clear.
It is not clear at all.
Major work.
So
As
now
we've run
looking at
across a
major
couple
work, currently it's worded, relocation, removal, or demolition of any structural part of a primary structure, including accessory buildings. This goes back to the square footage conversation, so being consistent, if you all decide to move it from 144 to something else, then I would want to make sure that it's just consistent throughout the document. That's all that is. Installation of in-ground swimming pools, this is what you just saw that I am suggesting we move into, move it to the minor, and if it meets the standards, we approve it. If it can't meet the standards, then it comes here as it would now.
As long as we can clarify those standards strong enough to be able to allow you to do that. I think
Exactly.
that's a good idea, but that's what it's going to boil down to, do the standards.
And that's what they're supposed to be
Everybody.
there
Yeah, but
for.
right now, it's bar none of major work. So if this group was hell-bent on reviewing every single in-ground pool, then we'd just be wasting our time. So we just got to make sure. Which have been
Well,
reviewed all over.
and the clearer those standards are, the easier it makes our work, too.
Correct, and that's the intent of a document. You know, we want to be able to utilize it. So this is similar to the minor of the consolidation. So this is basically the exact same replacement of architectural detail that changes the design or material from existing detail, whereas we're stating the same thing, but if it's not in compliance with the standards, then it would become a major. Honestly, that would be implied if it was listed in major, that it would become, listed in minor, it would become a major. So these are just things that I'm looking at.
And it's going to change, right? You're going to work on that.
Yeah, so the word consistent in the previous one would change. This would actually go away completely because it's already listed. And again, these would be what would be encompassed under that kind of consolidation.
If we can do what Ann said, which is
Absolutely,
clear up the three
redefining. Yep.
categories.
And we'll look at the wording of that to make sure that when we do put the whole document together, that it flows and it's understandable and comprehensive. So this is one area that I am recommending doing away with. It's the installation of structures that are not temporary and expected to be in place for 1 year. I think this is, it's
Not
explained.
temporary at that point.
Right, if it's not temporary, it's not temporary.
Is this really more on the commercial side anyway?
Yeah, it's for the opens.
Yeah.
There's a caveat in there that staff can approve the no greater than 2-week structures. It's for the opens. And so if anything that's greater than 2 weeks,
Because they
it's
put
not
up big
temporary.
structures in the middle of that golf course down there that are going to be there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
But
depending on the-
it's not for the modular units that the old elementary school needed as the
I wouldn't
capacity got
I
larger.
wouldn't call those temporary, because obviously they stuck around for a while.
And then installation of freestanding ATMs and kiosks. I think that should do away with that. There is actual language that would support this elsewhere as far as accessory structure and the visibility of it. So it could be moved even to a minor work with standards that it can't be on an exterior location or however you wanted to create those standards.
Or not
But
be in the front or whatever. I mean, we just,
it's just,
we don't know why that was even really, never mind. I
Where is
know
it?
why it was
Where is
thrown
it
in there,
now?
but it
this is
was,
currently under major work. It's one of the.
Yeah, but I mean, you said it's
last-
elsewhere.
Oh, so it
in
would
the
be,
PDO.
yes, if we did away with it, we can classify this as like an accessory structure.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay.
And then we'll look at the rest later, so, because we don't have time. But I think this gives me a really good idea of which direction to head. I can work on some of that verbiage and then introduce our current standards and then some proposed standards.
Yeah, and I'd like
So,
to be able to set them side by side, so again,
right,
what's changed, because if you don't do that, you lose what we took away, and we may not want to take something away that was there, but if you don't have both, you don't know it.
in a format, would you like to see more of a red line document or like here's the current document, here's the proposed document?
Red line.
Red line, okay.
This is really helpful, thanks.
I think your graphic work is really well.
Thank you.
I think what we can do in the meantime is, in getting things prepared for the October meeting, we'll have a better idea in the next 2 weeks of what cases we'll have, is we can grab a couple of these that we've talked about in the meantime and start, we can bring 2 or 3 in October.
If, depending on the caseload,
Sure.
Right now.
that's all it is.
Don't want to lose this momentum.
But would
I
it be,
mean, I would even be willing as far as to go to say we ought to have a second meeting if October caseloads are too heavy. You know, I agree. I don't want to lose the momentum. I want to keep things moving forward. And at some point, we're going to have those second meetings. I don't see any other way around it, given the caseloads that we're going right now.
but Alex,
Or
is
we'll
your,
never get this done.
is your concept that we would never do all of this in a single change to take to council? This will be multiple changes?
No, that we can get approval of the HPC, not maybe officially on it, but yeah, we agree you can move this to minor work with those standards. We like that. So then we can get a comprehensive, much just like we did in June and other meetings with this document that you guys just approved today. No, I don't want to piecemeal this.
I mean, Erica, I think will be back by the October one, but my recommendation would be that if we have 12 cases in October, and I ain't staying here till midnight.
No.
Then we ought to set up a second work date and keep this stuff moving. I don't think, otherwise, we're never going to get here from there.
We take a straw vote on, is it possible for us to meet once a month in a work session? Anybody?
I would
up
be
for that?
willing to do that as a work session.
I'm sure it's possible. The question is, can we find a date that works for a quorum?
With the understanding that
There's somebody here
all
that
we
doesn't
need
wanna
is a
do that?
quorum of people. We don't need the same requirements we need as long as we're not doing any COAs.
Have you finished your house and moved in?
Half.
You have all the time in the world.
Or,
Just like you do.
Yes, and I'm technically required, so except for the
Okay.
four conference calls I did today, I was free all day.
All right, so did we get through enough of it to give you some idea of what the next
Yeah.
steps are?
Yeah, I think this is good enough. I'll leave it right here. We can finish the rest of this at a later date. But I think what I'm hearing is I'm good to go to continue in my research and development, and I can bring that back to you maybe in a work session if you all agree upon that.
Pick one or two of them, run them out,
Okay.
and then we can,
Okay.
But
They're
as we
refunded.
look at these, they're going to be conditioned in looking at the same time at what the standards that will be, okay.
I'll probably attack it section by section.
Yeah, okay.
That would be-
All right, yeah, sounds good.
okay, so that's the end of 4.
End of 5. Well, I'm sorry,
5
4
is
that
done.
was,
Yeah,
right.
4. So.
Next meeting.
Next meeting?
We're up to next meeting. You got anything else, Alex, before I move to next meeting?
Can I
Anybody else
ask
have
I
anything?
have one other question, though. Our rules of procedure, are we going to look at those sometime, too?
Yes.
But we should be doing that every December.
Every December?
We should be doing that.
And we haven't done it in I don't know how many Decembers, so.
2013 was the last time you
We're trying to take some caseload off from you guys.
We got to agree that we ain't going to get there if we,
Right.
I've said it 6 times, that's enough. All right, next meeting is October 28th is a regular meeting, and based on what I'm hearing, it may be quite a few cases, although some of them are not particularly intensive.
Don't jinx it.
I know.
Okay.
Any other comments from attendees?
Thank
Are we
you
going to
for all the
set a date for the next work session? Can we take a
Is
stab?
October looking full?
We can do it on
Yeah.
next Thursday.
Ish? Yeah.
I don't mean to,
No, I,
No, it's a good idea.
in addition,
It's a good idea. I agree.
I like it.
Everybody break out their calendar.
I thought comments from attendees meant the teeming masses that are
Well,
here.
I'll get back to them in a minute.
okay.
One of the members, one of the teeming masses just left, 50% of the teeming masses just left. So we're talking October.
Next week?
how about the 14th?
14th works for me.
Can't do. Can't do the 14th.
21st?
First. And so John's got a yes?
Thursday?
It's a Thursday.
Yes.
Is it always 4 o'clock?
Oh, wait, well, that's going to be the next question. We pick a day.
Well, I mean, time and day kind of go together, so.
4 o'clock Thursday, the 21st.
Fine for
4
me.
PM, 21, 10:21. Oh, wait, is that the, no, that's, because the 28th is the HPC meeting. That's fine with me. John?
Are we saying
Works.
it's like a,
Give me,
Richard, does it
give me
work for you?
one
I don't
second.
think it works for Alexandria.
Yeah, actually, I have an appointment that day.
Okay. Well, you're kind of a critical member of the story.
Well, I'm not the only staff member, so
Well, would a different time work, or no?
earlier.
Is Darren volunteering to run point or? Okay. So then I think we should work around your schedule as well.
How about at 2 o'clock on that day?
Works for me.
Fine for me.
Richard, can you do 2 o'clock?
Can we do it closer to 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah.
How long
Not-
are we
not
going
me,
on
not
this?
Let's say 2 hours.
Wait a minute, we got it.
Do we have TRC
Oh,
that day?
Alex can't do?
Yeah.
2 o'clock.
Noon and
No,
working lunch.
TRC,
Noon works. Oh.
I was gonna say, if you guys, what about the morning? Are you all usually,
Okay by me?
I get up by 6 o'clock, so I'm fine.
mornings would be
That's fine.
Thursday morning,
Good morning.
8 o'clock.
8:30?
8
Do it early.
o'clock?
And you're providing, staff is providing the coffee that day if we do 8
I'll
o'clock
make
in the morning.
coffee.
9 a.m. How about 9 a.m.?
I like noon.
9?
You guys can do that?
Thursday.
Where have
9
you
a.m.
been?
Yes,
I know.
I'd
why
rather
we
do
don't
the
board.
morning, actually. I get more work done in the morning.
So 9 to 11?
On the 21st.
Yes, and I'll send
9
out
to
an email.
11 on 10:21.
This room is open.
Is?
Okay,
Okay.
and thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any other comments? Okay.
Well, thanks for all your hard work, though.
Yes.
I mean,
Thanks for all
this
your
is the
diligence.
opportunity we've been waiting for, a small caseload where we've
Doesn't
got
look like there are
staff.
any other attendees, so we don't have those. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Hand up? No.
Aye. Meeting's closed.